Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Memorial Day weekend. Day that we take a moment, right, and thank all of those who gave the ultimate sacrifice for our country. And honor all of our veterans. Larry, you're a veteran, right? Any other veterans here?
Jeff and my father are both.
Were.
They're both.
Right.
Both.
Right. My father, still alive, 92. He was in World War II and in the Korean War.
Wow.
Army, or the Navy first, and then the Army Reserve. So, yeah. All right. So today we're talking about the pathway of grace. And this month we're exploring the idea that there is an urge in each of us to transcend the mundane, to experience higher levels of being, higher levels of thinking, and higher levels of behaving in this human experience. Because we know that we're more than just what we're experiencing, right? This desire is fueled by an underlying urge to experience our oneness with the divine. Or said another way, we all aspire to live the spiritual truth that we are. We are being supported in this quest each week by looking at different pathways of transcendence, each one taking us deeper and leading us higher. We've looked at the pathways of power, clarity, and enlightenment, which we did last week. That was kind of fun. Today we're going to talk about a pathway that we really can't talk about. Now, when I say that we really can't talk about it, I don't mean that we shouldn't talk about it. I mean that we really can't. We're not able to. Because it's a part of the awe and mystery of God. And as soon as we put words to it, we confine it. We restrict it. We limit it. And we make it finite. And it is something that cannot be confined. It's something that cannot be restricted. And it's something that is not limited, nor is it finite. While we cannot really adequately talk about it today, we're still going to give it a try. Today, our pathway of transcendence is the pathway of grace, the grace of God. My guess is that each one of you has a preconceived idea about that word, a set of mental parameters about its meaning, which have already bubbled up for you when I say the grace of God. Am I right about that? You all have what you're thinking that means, right? Some of you may have the thought that grace is always a good topic because it's a word of comfort. It's a word of comfort. But for others, it might be a far-off concept with which you've had little experience and therefore the word has little personal meaning or relevance. For still others, it may bring up feelings of unworthiness, inadequacy, and undeservedness. It all depends on your personal history and relationship with the concept of grace. Today, realizing that words are inadequate, I hope to bring us all to a greater heart understanding of this amazing concept behind the word grace and the power of grace to call us into transcendent ways of thinking, ways of being, and ways of behaving in this world of trials and tribulations that some of us currently live. To get us on the same page, let's begin by trying to define that which is indefinable, right? So let's start with grace defined. I've always enjoyed the etymology of a word, its origin, and the word grace comes to us from an ancient root word meaning favor or benefit. Our dear friend, Daniel Webster, puts a definition to grace in his most famous book, the dictionary, and according to it, God's grace is divine love and protection bestowed freely on people. Divine love and protection bestowed freely on people. In Psalms 45:2, it's written, "Grace is poured upon your lips. Therefore God has blessed you forever." And the Apostle Paul wrote, "By grace you have been saved through faith, and this is not our own doing, it is a gift of God, not because of any works, lest any man should boast." And our own founder, Ernest Holmes, writes in The Science of Mind, "Grace is the givingness of spirit to its creation." If we were to summarize just that handful of thoughts about grace, we would say that grace is God's divine love, freely given to all. God's eternal protection, freely given to all. God's ever-present blessings, freely given to all. God's gift of absolute favor and benefit, freely given to all. These are all ways to define God's grace, inadequate as they may be. And yukata know the ending phrase of every one of those descriptors, right? Freely given to all. Freely given to all. God as divine favor, grace as the eternal loving kindness of God is working for and through us constantly. You do not have to earn grace. It is not something that is paid out only to the good or the deserving. Grace is not something to work for, to develop, to build up, or to cultivate. It simply is. It simply is. God's favor, givingness, love, blessings, and protections come to us simply because we are. Just because we are. Ernest Holmes writes, God loves all alike and causes the rain to fall and the sun to shine alike upon all. In arms which are all-inclusive, divine love encompasses everything. I love that visual. I love the visual of relaxing into the divine arms of spirit. It's such a beautiful statement, isn't it? In the arms which are all-inclusive, divine love encompasses everything. So to me, that is the true definition of grace. Right in this moment, then, if you are one whose preconceived notion about grace was either indifference or inexperience, or if the concept of grace brought up feelings of unworthiness or inadequacy, right now, breathe in this new way of looking at grace. For those of you who already had a pretty good relationship with grace, stop for a moment and reaffirm it. Reconnect to it and renew your relationship to grace. Because the relationship we have with grace is the key to our well-being. Have probably all said or heard the statement at one point or another, there but for the grace of God go I, right? What's going on for us? What are we thinking when we say that? Usually we're feeling quite relieved that we're not the one in a similar situation to the person with whom we are referring. There's that gigantic whew, right? And a wiping of the brow. And there's also a gigantic error in that statement. Think about that. And after our conversation so far this morning, do you see the gigantic error? It implies that somehow God's grace has been bestowed upon you, but missed that other person. When God was handing out grace, that person was at the refreshment stand. And I gotta say, that statement reminded me of my daughter, because when it was her term to bat, playing softball, where was she? Getting her hot dog with her free ticket. Allison, get back here and bat. Right. So that's incorrect thinking if we believe, which I do, that God's love and protection are bestowed freely on all people. So I'll have to think about that before we look at someone and think, ooh, why is that person missing out? It's not. It's just the appearance. So onward to grace accepted. What's the difference then? The difference is we must receive it. We must accept it. Well, that's where the choice comes in. It's not that they were missing when it was handed out. It's that each one of us has to accept it. We must open our hearts, our minds, our very lives for God's grace to have its way with us. At his rational best, Holmes wrote in the 1926 original Science of Mind, grace is not something God imposed upon us, but is the logical result of the correct acceptance of life and a correct relationship with spirit. Ramakrishna said the same thing a little bit more poetically. He wrote, the winds of grace are blowing all the time. All we have to do is raise our sails. Remember this wonderful, I think if you've been here recently, I've shared this story with you. It's a story from the Hindu faith. And this was the great devotee of Krishna that was once challenged by some very powerful men in his village. Remember this story? And they just didn't believe in the god Krishna. They said to him, prove to us that Krishna is a god. Make this dead cow come back to life. The devotee said, this is no problem for Krishna, but give me 3 days. He spent the next 3 days in agonizing prayer, day and night and day, praying to Krishna to bring that cow back to life. And finally, in the 11th hour, the cow came back to life, and all the villagers rejoiced and believed that Krishna is a god. The man, of course, is grateful and relieved, and a short time later he became very depressed and sad, and Krishna came to him and asked why he was so sad. Lord, why did you make me desperate when you could have brought that cow back to life immediately? Smiling, Krishna said, it is you who gave me 3 days' time. We talk about that with treatment sometimes too, because we know that treatment can heal instantaneously, just like that. But a lot of times we can't get on board with that timetable. Remember that time is a concept that was created by man. There is no time in spirit. Spirit only knows perfection. So Ernest Holmes also wrote, "The only reason we are limited is that we have not allowed the divine within us to more completely express. How much life can we experience? As much as we can embody. We grow in grace, as it were. We grow in power. But right today we can expect to demonstrate or to have our prayers answered according to our belief and the embodiment of that belief." That's where our part comes in. God's grace is like a vast ocean. We can sit on the shore and collect shells. We can go further still and catch a fish. Or we could dive deep and bring back a pearl. The deeper we dive, the more we align with the divine presence and the more we are in the flow of grace. In John 15, the scripture reads, "Remain with me and I with you. Just as a branch cannot give fruit by itself unless it remains in the vine, even so you cannot unless you remain with me." Of course, it is through our spiritual practices, our scientific mind treatments, our prayers, our meditation, that we remain connected. That's how we remain connected. Then we dive deeply. Joel Goldsmith in The Art of Meditation wrote, "There is an area of consciousness revealed in meditation through which we are instantly one with God, and through which we find all forms of good instantly available. This area of consciousness has been described as the sea of spirit, the universal or divine soul, the Father within. In achieving conscious contact with this sea of spirit, we find divine love pouring itself into expression so that we no longer live by personal effort alone, but by grace. By grace." Isn't it amazing how that things just come together? Rather than seeking our good from persons or things, we tap this universal soul and become beholders of its activity, pouring forth as the ideas which become the human forms of good necessary to our present experience. It is only as we learn to look within to this infinite invisible that we begin to understand the nature of grace. So let's take a moment right now to begin to understand the nature of grace by turning to look within to this infinite invisible. Let us right now tap into this universal soul, the sea of spirit, the divine Father, Mother, God. If you close your eyes for a minute and join me in knowing that there is only one God, one life, one power. In this moment, I recognize that I am a divine expression of the One, as is each and every one here. And knowing this, feeling this truth about our being, about who we are, I know without a doubt that when I accept the grace of Spirit as my truth, I am lifted into higher levels of being, higher levels of thinking, and higher levels of behaving in this human experience, and experience only love and joy and the very best that Spirit has to offer. I'd like to bring my talk to an end by reading The Touch of a Master's Hand, one of my favorite poems that I have read before, but it fits so perfectly and beautifully as an ending to this talk. "'Twas battered and scarred, and the auctioneer thought it scarcely worth his while to waste much time on the old violin. But he held it up with a smile. 'What am I bidding, good folks?' he cried. 'Who'll start bidding for me? $1, $1? Who'll make it $2? $2? And who will make it $3? $3 once, $3 twice, going for $3, but no!' From the room far back, a gray-haired man came forward and picked up the bow. Then, wiping the dust from the old violin and tightening up the strings, he played a melody pure and sweet as an angel sings. The music ceased, and the auctioneer, with a voice that was quiet and low, said, 'What am I bidding for this old violin?' And he held it up with the bow. $1,000, and who'll make it $2? 2,000, and who'll make it $3? 3,000 once, 3,000 twice, and going and gone, said he. The people cheered, but some of them cried, we do not quite understand. What change it's worth, the man replied, the touch of a master's hand. And many a man of life out of tune and battered and torn within is auctioned cheap to a thoughtless crowd, much like the old violin. A mess of pottage, a glass of wine, a game, and he travels on. He's going once, he's going twice, he's going and almost gone. But the master comes, and the foolish crowd can never quite understand the worth of a soul and the change that's wrought by the touch of a master's hand. And that hand is the hand of God, is the hand of Spirit, and most amazing grace. So now what I would like us to do now is to sing our version of Amazing Grace. So if you'd like to stand for this, let's... Sing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a soul like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see. 'Twas grace that taught my heart to fear, and grace my fears relieved. How precious is the grace appear, the hour I first believed. My chains are gone, I've been set free. The love of God envelops me, and fear and doubt no more remain. Unending love, amazing grace. Very nice. And so it is.